Before air conditioning, one design trick kept homes 15 to 20 degrees cooler than the outside air. No electricity, no machine. High ceilings, ridge vents pulling heat straight out of the attic. Deep eaves blocking the sun before it ever hit a window. Homes built this way before the 1950s are still standing, and many are still cooler than the new construction next door. Most modern houses can't do this anymore. Not because it stopped working, because somewhere along the way, it got left out. So what exactly happened here? Stay with me, because none of this is folklore. Walk into a farmhouse built before central air ever existed, and you'll notice something almost unsettling. It's quiet, it's still, and it's noticeably cooler than the street outside. No hum of a compressor, no vents blowing recycled air, just stillness and shade, doing a machine's job for nothing. Climb up into the attic of one of these houses, and you'll usually find something easy to miss. A vent set right at the ridge of the roof. Sometimes it's a row of wooden louvers, gray with age. Sometimes it's a simple metal cap, painted to match the shingles, never once replaced or repaired. Nobody points it out on a house tour. It looks like nothing. It is, in fact, doing most of the work. Here's the part nobody really explains anymore. Heat rises. That's not a folk saying, that's physics. In a house with a vent at the peak of the roof and openings lower down, vents tucked under the eaves, windows positioned to catch a breeze, hot air doesn't sit and bake the rooms underneath it. It climbs, it escapes through that gap at the top. And as it leaves, it pulls cooler air in behind it from below. Builders called it the stack effect. The house breathes on its own. No fan, no switch, no bill. That's the entire mechanism. And it's almost embarrassingly simple once you see it, which is exactly why it's so easy to walk past without ever noticing. Now add the second layer, because the vent alone isn't the whole story. Walk the porch of an old farmhouse, or better yet, an Amish home, and notice how deep that porch actually is. Not a token strip of concrete by the front door, a real, wide, shaded run that wraps the house and keeps direct sun off the walls and windows for most of the day. Notice the ceiling height inside, often 9, 10, 11 feet, built tall on purpose, so hot air has somewhere to go before it ever reaches the people living underneath it. Notice the walls themselves thick, often masonry or packed earth in hotter regions, soaking up heat slowly through the day and releasing it slowly at night, instead of letting the inside temperature spike the second the sun comes out. None of this is exotic. None of it requires a patent or a secret formula. It's geometry, orientation, and mass, lined up on purpose, by people who didn't have another option and built around the problem, instead of paying to override it. This is why that number matters. 15 to 20 degrees. That's not a marketing claim. That's the real difference a properly built, well-shaded, well-ventilated home can hold against the outside air, with nothing running and nothing plugged in. It sounds too good. It isn't. It's just been a long time since most people had a reason to notice it. And here's where the story widens. Because this wasn't some fringe trick used by a handful of stubborn farmers. Before the 1950s, this was simply how houses got built in hot regions, full stop. It wasn't an upgrade, it was the baseline. Builders in the South oriented homes to catch prevailing breezes the same way they laid a foundation automatically, without debate. In the dry Southwest, homes leaned on a related trick, pulling outside air across water-soaked pads, cooling it through evaporation before it ever entered a room. That technology never actually went away, by the way. Walk through parts of Arizona or inland California today, and you'll still find evaporative coolers sitting on rooftops, doing exactly what they did 70 years ago. Because in a dry climate, nothing beats them on cost. And it wasn't only the dry states leaning on airflow. Across most of the rest of the country, mid-century homes commonly installed something called a whole house fan, a large fan set into the attic floor or a hallway ceiling, pulling cool evening air in through open windows and pushing the day's trapped heat straight out through the roof vents. Run it for 20 minutes after sunset, and a house that baked all afternoon could drop 10 degrees before bedtime. This wasn't a niche gadget for the resourceful few. For a couple of decades, it was a standard line item in a new American home, right alongside a front porch and a screen door. So, if the trick worked this well, and worked this widely, stay with me here because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Why did it disappear from almost every new house built after that? It didn't disappear because someone proved it didn't work. It disappeared because something else showed up that was easier to sell. After the war, Central air conditioning stopped being a luxury item and started being a standard feature, pushed hard by manufacturers eager to put a unit in every new home going up. And new homes were going up by the millions fast, uniform, built on tight margins, stamped out across entire suburbs in a matter of months. For a builder racing to finish a subdivision on schedule, a compressor and a duct system solved the cooling problem instantly, on every lot, regardless of which direction the house faced. Designing around the sun, the wind, and the shade took time, judgment, and site-specific planning. A machine didn't. It worked the same whether the house faced north or south, whether the lot had trees or none at all. So one by one, the old features started disappearing from the blueprint. Ceiling height dropped, because every extra foot cost more lumber and more time to frame. Deep eaves got trimmed back, because they added labor and material for a benefit a new buyer couldn't see standing in the driveway. Attic vents shrank to the bare code minimum, sometimes less, because the unit on the side of the house was now doing the job those vents used to do for free. Nobody banned the old way. Nobody passed a law against a ridge vent or a deep porch. That's important. Stay with that for a second, because this isn't a story about a villain in a boardroom. It's quieter than that, and in some ways more uncomfortable. The old system didn't lose because it failed. It lost because it was slower to build, harder to standardize, and impossible to put a brand name on. A machine could be manufactured, marketed, and sold the same way in Phoenix and in Pittsburgh. A house design couldn't. So the trick didn't vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because something cheaper to build and far easier to sell showed up at exactly the moment America was building homes faster than at any point in its history and convenience. Once it's standardized, has a way of quietly erasing whatever came before it. Not because of safety, not because of failure, because of speed, and because of margin. And that's only the surface of it. Because once you start asking why the design disappeared, you start finding out what it actually cost the people living in these new houses and how much of it is sitting right there, still recoverable, in homes people already own. Stay with me. Here's where it changes. Here's the cost, and it shows up the moment the bill arrives. A house built around a machine instead of around the climate doesn't just lose its old ventilation, it becomes dependent on that machine working. Every single day, all summer, with no backup plan if it doesn't. Lower ceilings trap heat instead of releasing it. Shrunken attic vents mean a sealed-up attic can hit 130, 140 degrees on a clear afternoon, baking straight down through the ceiling into rooms. The air conditioner is fighting to cool from below. The compressor isn't just cooling the house anymore, it's fighting the house. And every degree it fights costs money, every single month, for as long as you own the place. That's the quiet trade nobody put in the brochure. You gave up a free system that worked with the building, and you took on a paid system that has to work against it. Notice what happens next, because this is where the story stops being about the past and starts being about right now. Drive into Arizona, or inland California, or anywhere with hot, dry summers, and you will still find evaporative coolers sitting on rooftops today, not as a museum piece, not as a retro throwback, but because they cost a fraction of what a compressor costs to run. Pulling air across a wet pad and letting evaporation do the cooling uses a sliver of the electricity a standard air conditioner pulls down. Because it isn't fighting the air's temperature directly, it's using the air's own dryness against itself. In a humid climate, that trick falls apart. In a dry one, it never stopped working, and it never needed to be reinvented. It just kept doing its job in the regions where people never fully switched it off. So stay with that for a second, because it reframes everything you just heard. This wasn't a method that lost on merit and got replaced by something better. It was a method that lost the marketing war in most of the country, while quietly continuing to win on cost in the places that never fully abandoned it. And here's the part that explains why the rest of the country didn't follow. A central air system is the same part, the same install, the same warranty, whether it's going into a brick colonial in Ohio or a stucco ranch in Texas. One supply chain, one training program for installers, one product line a company can manufacture at scale and sell nationwide with a single ad campaign. Passive design isn't like that. It depends on which way the lot faces, how much shade the property has, how dry or humid the regional air is, how steep the roof pitch needs to be to vent properly. You can't put that on a billboard. You can't franchise a sun angle. So the industry that grew up around the machine had every incentive to keep building machines, and very little incentive to teach an entire generation of new homeowners how a roof vent and a deep eave used to do the same job for nothing. Not a conspiracy, not a secret meeting in a back room. Just a simple, repeating pattern. The thing that's easiest to manufacture and sell becomes the thing everyone assumes is the only option, and the thing that requires actual judgment quietly gets treated like folklore instead of engineering. Here's the part nobody tells you, though, and it's the part that should genuinely change how you look at your own roof. That old system never actually disappeared from professional knowledge. It just stopped being marketed to homeowners directly. Walk into any serious home energy audit today, and you'll hear the auditor talk about attic ventilation, radiant barriers, and whole house fans as some of the highest return upgrades available, not because they're nostalgic, but because the math still works. A radiant barrier stapled under the roof deck reflects heat instead of absorbing it, which means less of that 140-degree attic air radiates down into the living space below. A properly sized ridge and soffit vent system keeps that attic from turning into an oven in the first place. A whole house fan, the same basic device that used to come standard in mid-century homes, is still sold today, still installed today, and still capable of dropping a hothouse 10 degrees in 20 minutes once the sun goes down for the cost of running a large fan, not a compressor. That's the buried proof, and it's sitting in plain sight. The system never failed an inspection, never got banned, never got disproven. It just got quietly moved out of the new construction default and into the optional upgrades list, sold back to homeowners one piece at a time, decades later, as if it were a brand new idea. And the numbers behind it aren't subtle either. A whole house fan typically draws a fraction of the wattage of a central air compressor, closer to running a couple of box fans than to running an entire HVAC system, which is exactly why energy auditors still rank it as one of the highest return on investment upgrades a homeowner can make. An evaporative cooler in a dry climate can cost a quarter, sometimes less, of what a standard air conditioner costs to run over the same stretch of summer. None of this is speculative. It's the same math utility companies and home performance contractors use every day. It just rarely gets mentioned to the person standing in a hardware store deciding between a bigger air conditioner and a $20 attic vent. So here's what that actually means for you. On a regular house, on a regular property, no engineering degree required. If your attic doesn't have real ventilation intake low, exhaust high, that's the first thing worth checking, because a hot, sealed attic is quietly working against every dollar you spend on cooling. If your roof doesn't have a radiant barrier and you're due for a re-roof anyway, that's a near-permanent upgrade with a real payback. If you live somewhere dry, a modern evaporative cooler can handle entire stretches of summer for a fraction of what a compressor pulls, especially in a garage, workshop, or shed that doesn't need full climate control. And if your house still has its original deep eaves and tall ceilings, that's not an outdated design. That's a free system you already own, and most people never bother to find out whether it's still working the way it was built to. This is why that number from the beginning still matters. 15 to 20 degrees, with nothing plugged in, isn't a relic of a slower, simpler past. It's a standing offer that never got revoked, just buried under 70 years of easier, more profitable defaults, sold to you as the only option, because nobody profits from teaching you to use the one you already have. And that's really what this comes down to. Not a single villain, not a single cover-up, just a long, quiet pattern of convenience, overriding competence, generation after generation, until something genuinely useful starts to sound like a myth. The people who notice it are the same kind of people who walk into an old farmhouse and ask why it's cooler than the new one next door, instead of just accepting that it is. That's not nostalgia. That's paying attention to what actually works. So go check your attic. Look up whether it's properly vented for your square footage. Look at your eaves, your ceiling height, the direction your windows face in the afternoon sun. You might find out the free system was built into your house the whole time, just waiting for someone to stop overriding it. And if this is the kind of thing that was hiding in plain sight, wait until you hear what was happening underground, because the next forgotten system isn't in the attic. It's in the ground beneath the house, in a kind of cellar most people now use for nothing but storage. And it used to do something far stranger than just keep things cool.